And welcome back to People Purpose Place. This is Ron and Darren Finlay, and this week we've got our guest with much anticipation, Professor Anne. How are you, Professor Anne?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Darren and Ron. I've really been looking forward to it.
Always a pleasure to have a chat with you, Professor Anne. We've done some business and had a bit of backwards and forwards over a number of years now. But it's fabulous to get this opportunity to sit down with you in person and broadcast to a wider audience to see anyone out there who's got healthy home questions.
Thank you.
And you've had a relaxing day, feeling charged and invigorated?
I'm ready to go. It's been great.
Awesome. How about yourself, Darren? I understand you've had a bit on today as well.
Yeah, I can probably. I know we got a check-in question that probably touches on this in a minute. So, yeah, I've had a few health excitement for the day, but I'm looking forward to this conversation because it's one of those areas that we don't often talk about enough.
Yes.
But I think more and more as we see stuff occur that it's becoming more and more. People are becoming more and more aware of its importance and.
Yep.
I've certainly learned a heap over the years from Professor Anne. I'm hoping we can continue to increase that awareness for everyone out there so they can make better decisions with their housing and their homing.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to fire off by the way of introduction to People Purpose Place, we do this broadcast every Monday evening at about 6:30 to talk all matters housing. Tonight's topic is a very key and near and dear to our heart, the topic of healthy homes. And Professor Anne is a world-renowned expert in this area and has done an extensive professional work in this background. And I'll get Professor Anne to speak a bit more eloquently to that in a moment. Perhaps, broadly speaking, we're trying to address all matters that are addressing the housing crisis. And over the last couple of years in particular, there's been many reasons for us to think about our health, hygiene, transmissions of virus, etc. So I don't know if you've noticed the media, there's been a bit of publicity about it. So it's relevant. And we'd love to dive into this topic this evening. And it's an opportunity to raise questions. And we don't profess to have all the answers in everybody's circumstance, but we would like to open your mind to the idea and the discussion. If you are challenged by our discussion, we're happy to have a bit of a conversation backwards and forwards, and absolutely if we get something wrong, we'll happily correct it. But the idea is to have the long form discussion so we can actually get down to the nitty gritty of what are the relevant factors for healthy homes perhaps. To lead into the discussion, we all try and get into the same space and time, and we have a check-in question. This week is fairly topical. In the past week, so the last 7 days, what actions have you taken, perhaps, to improve your health? Professor Anne, did you want to lead off with that?
I'll start out. This is an easy one. This happened today. Rowan and I went to the beach. We went to the beach, talked about healthy housing, took a walk along the pier, put our feet in the water. It was great. Got grounded, yes.
The mental health is very important, and perhaps that's been a bit neglected in our housing for lots of people. And yourself, Darren, I understand you've been making some big health changes in particular today.
Yeah, I had a birthday in the last week or so, and it's normally a chance to have a bit of a, think about it or a bit of a ponder about a few of those things. And obviously with the grey beard, I'm not getting any younger. So I have tried to make some positive health changes. And like you just mentioned, I think in today's world, once upon a time, it was all about, getting back to the gym or doing those things. But I've added some mindfulness to my regime as a constant. Also doing a little bit more breath work to see whether that can help me. But also I had a bit of in the last couple of weeks, I've had a bit of a health scare with the sun cancer removed from my back, which was a nasty variety. So I was back in today getting some more of that removed. So hopefully they've been able to get rid of all of that, so I can then get back into some positive momentum. So, but I'm feeling good for the changes I've made. So, and that's probably a good segue into our housing, because I think a lot of people are getting impacted by our housing and the way they live, and they probably don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. I have made some sort of fairly soft New Year's resolutions, soft to match my Christmas girth, but it's been the last 12 months in particular has been around mindful and healthy mindset, and the house can obviously have a very big impact on that. So
Yep.
I suspect a lot of our population out there have a large degree of trauma or anxiety or stress about just housing security and housing tenure. So, and that's a big impact on your mental health. But specifically tonight, I might hand over to Professor Anne, because in the last couple of years we've been really aware about personal hygiene, health and pandemic sort of impacts in air quality and cleaning our hands and just basic hygiene. As a professor and a long-term practitioner in this space, Professor Anne, can you tell us a bit about your background and what's got you into this healthy home space?
Well, first of all, thank you again so much for this opportunity. We start by saying this is a topic I am passionate about. I've worked in it for nearly 30 years now, and I'm passionate about it for many reasons. One is that it's something that affects everybody. We all live in homes, and the unhealthiness of homes is a really big problem, and people aren't aware of it. That's another reason I'm passionate about it, is it's the untold story. Most people aren't aware that their houses can be directly affecting their health. Typically, people get a migraine or they start sneezing, they take a pharmaceutical for it, rather than thinking, what is the source of it? What am I being exposed to that could be causing these symptoms and these health effects? I hear so often people telling me, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, that make their house healthy and they get their life back. And that comes to the third reason I'm so passionate about this. It's something you can do about directly, immediately. You can often have instant benefits. You have long-term benefits, relatively inexpensive to make changes. And that's what I'm really happy about doing too, is that I've remedied at least 200 to 300 unhealthy homes and try to make them healthy, and people get their health back. They get their jobs back. They get their lives back. But to just little things day to day, if you've got a healthy home, to keep a healthy home. Again, I think this is part of the untold story, and I've been in the fortunate position of being able to do a lot of analytic work with my wonderful postdocs and PhD students to do a lot of the work and to figure out what are these things that we're really being exposed to. And so I thought, with that as a prelude, how I got into this. Well, first of all, let me just say that I think it's a global problem, and especially in industrialized countries such as Australia, the US, the UK, Europe. What most people don't realize is that most of our exposure to hazardous pollutants, the things that directly affect our health, happen in places we think are safe. Our own homes, our workplaces, our healthcare facilities. Now, the irony is that these indoor locations in the indoor air are essentially completely unregulated. Our laws focus on outdoor air quality, but indoor air quality is essentially untouched. So people assume that they're indoors, they're safe, they're breathing healthy air. The opposite is true. Unregulated, unmonitored. Now, the other ironic part of this is that what are the primary sources of pollutants indoors? Well, two main things: building materials, construction materials like paints and timber products, manufactured wood products, plywood, metalhide, carpeting, furnishings, and the other major source is our consumer products, personal care products, laundry detergents, air fresheners, cleaning supplies, pandemic products, like these hand sanitizers people are using. So those are the two main sources. So more than 90% of our exposure to hazardous pollutants that directly affect our health, both short-term and long-term, come from things that are largely within our control. They're not the big bad sources outside. They're right within, very close to us. So how did I get interested in this area? Well, as background, all of my degrees are in civil and environmental engineering, and I got into engineering because I always liked mathematics and physics, but I really wanted to help society. And civil engineering, environmental engineering was civic, public oriented, and so I did my training in the U.S. I did my PhD, did a postdoc at Stanford University in California. I'm originally from California. I was a professor in the U.S. for 20 years and came to Australia for a position as a professor at the University of Melbourne. I also have a professor position at James Cook University and an adjunct position at QUT. Anyway, so I'll say that so I've been a professor for most of my career, which also gave me the opportunity to really investigate a lot of these problems and to have the luxury to do research on things that most people aren't able to do. Anyway, back to how I got interested in this. Civil engineering, its roots are in public health. And certainly environmental engineering, you care about healthy environments. And I was trying to figure out, well, what are the big pollutants? What are we really exposed to now that's affecting our health? And what I found out was really surprising, that most of our exposure to pollutants happens indoors. And I was trying to figure out, why is this the case? So I started drilling down into it little by little. And that's when I realized that our biggest health hazards are our homes usually. And then what can you do about it to clean it up? So that's kind of how I got involved in this area. What I might do is I could keep talking, but I might just break it up here to see if there's any questions from each of you before continuing to talk more.
So I guess before meeting you and before getting involved into the healthy housing in any level of detail, I would have naively made assumptions that emissions from the Volkswagen car exhaust or asbestos would be something to look out for, or things that were public enemy number one. They would have been sort of top of mind for health impacts, to my thinking, before starting on this journey. But in actual fact, what you've pointed out to me is that we're spending more and more time in confined indoor spaces, where none of the contaminants are even tested, and often we can't even actually measure them.
That's right. Well, there's a couple that you're absolutely right, Rowan, spot on. So people tend to think that hazardous waste sites or automobiles are the big source of pollutants now. Actually, no. For instance, an air freshener. People use air fresheners. Air fresheners do not freshen the air. They don't clean or disinfect the air. They add a combination of potentially hazardous chemicals to the air we breathe. And as an example, if a chemical such as acetaldehyde is coming out of the tailpipe, it's regulated. If it's coming out of the air freshener, it's not. Yeah, and so in widespread studies of homes, what are the highest levels and the highest concentration of pollutants? They're from these fragrance products that we use. And that's a concern. So I should say that we've got this problem of more energy efficient homes means tighter homes, less ventilation, less fresh air getting in. Yeah. Plus, people are inside now using more of these problematic sources, and the chemicals can't go anywhere. Yeah. Now, especially during the pandemic, more people were working from home. So home becomes your workplace, and people were using all of these products thinking they're cleaning, disinfect. That's another topic. I mean, basically, you can clean, disinfect perfectly well without all these multicolored, toxic products. You can use vinegar and friction and disinfect perfectly well. But anyway, that's another conversation. Back to the issue about where you need your home to be a safe place. During disasters, people take refuge in their home. During cyclones or during floods, during droughts, during heat waves, during pandemics, people become cloistered in their homes, but then their homes become another source of the health hazard.
And often our mechanical ventilation is fairly poorly considered, if at all. I know in North Queensland we have recirculating air constantly. So it's almost never getting fresh air. It's just pumping around the air that's in the house. So whatever you have is being recirculated. So you're not shedding virus or getting rid of contaminants. You're just circulating them around and around.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And that's the problem. And even if you did have an air filter, I mean, I've also analyzed the effectiveness of air filters. It's easier to prevent the source from getting into your environment than trying to clean it up after it's in the environment. Prevent source reduction is the best approach. Just don't use the products to begin with, because the filters are never going to be that effective at getting things out. And filters have their own problems.
Filters, who does the maintenance?
And filters can off-gas their own range of chemicals, especially filters that are in housing that's not inert, such as plastics. The plastics heat up, off-gas plastics. You have all the chemicals in the filtration media. If the filters get you filled up, then they off-gas what they previously collected. So there's all sorts of problems with filters. I'm going to have another little tangential thing here. So a lot of my research has been involved with analyzing fragrance products.
Yes.
The problems with fragrances, and I've done now national epidemiological studies in 7 countries around the world, and the findings are remarkably consistent. About a third of the general population have adverse health effects when exposed to ordinary fragrance products, air fresheners.
1 in 3.
1 in 3. Cleaning products, essential oils, personal care products, all that. And some of them are so severe they're disabling. The seizures, migraines, loss of consciousness, asthma attacks, autism. I mean, there's a range of adverse health effects associated with these exposures. So one may ask, well, fragrance is fragrance. Well, there's a difference between, like one of the most common fragrance chemicals is limonene. You find it in everything. Yep. There's a difference between limonene from an orange and limonene from a laboratory. And actually, we just finished I finished some studies with my postdoc with mosquitoes, looking at toxicity, and it proves it out. There's a difference between a natural chemical and a synthetic chemical. And so also people who are fragrance sensitive, they'll tell me, I have no problem around flowers and fruits.
Yep.
And not the fruit-scented stuff. And then on that, the term natural fragrance has no regulatory definition at all, or chemical definition. And that's what I'm concerned about, is people think, oh, it's natural fragrance. It's still a fragrance. Fragrances cause problems. We've also sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so if this is occurring, how does the average person on the street find out an independent source? Because if it's not regulated, they're probably not disclosing it. Is there any place where people can go to say find out about what they're really?
There is no law or policy anywhere in the world that requires disclosure of all ingredients in a consumer product or the fragrance in that product. Now, there's an equivalent thing for foods. Foods and pharmaceuticals do have to disclose their ingredients, except if they have a flavor. And flavors are chemically similar to fragrances. Flavors, so if you see natural flavor, that could be 100 or so chemicals. You have no idea what you're eating. So on the fragrance issue, one of the problems I always see is, after someone comes in and say, I'm getting sick from the air freshener at work. My employer shows me the safety data sheet. There are no hazardous chemicals listed, or the ones that are there are very benign, like ethanol. So the employer says, no problem. First of all, there's no requirement for a safety data sheet to list all hazardous chemicals. None. Okay, not on consumer products. The safety data sheet does not necessarily apply to consumer products. There's no regulatory requirements for both hazardous ingredients. If there are any ingredients listed, they're typically the very neutral and pleasant sounding ones. Same thing with a can. If you pick up the can and you look at see what's in the air freshener, you may see a few chemicals listed, but not necessarily the problematic ones. And good luck calling the companies to try to get information. You will not get information anywhere. And that's why my studies, I have to say, and you will give my website at the end of this podcast. You get all of my studies for free, all of the data for free. I've had fortunate to be able to have access to wonderful students and postdocs and PhD students and wonderful GC gas chromatography mass spectrometry machine. Then we analyze products and find out what's really in them. I do not disclose brand names, but I can tell you what's in the products. I've yet to find a fragrance product that didn't have what's called hazardous chemicals, ones with no safe exposure level. Because I often get that argument, well, they're at low levels, so you really have to worry. Well, a couple things. One is low levels add up. Another is low levels can be hazardous. We're finding now it's kind of turns toxicology on its head. Lower levels can actually be more hazardous than higher levels of chemicals. For instance, with phthalates. because they infiltrate your body's immune system. And also, finally, for some of these chemicals, there is no known safe exposure level.
Yes.
So the low level argument doesn't go very far scientifically or in terms of biology. So now that kind of, yep, go ahead, please.
Sorry, interrupting. But I was wondering whether, you know how there's, say, with deodorants at the moment, you'll see that some people are moving towards having no aluminium in there. It seems to be a common thing that a lot of people are trying for. Why do you think someone would be trying to remove that? Like, what would have triggered them to use that as a marketing ploy?
That's almost kind of like the chemical chase, the chemical shell game. They kind of find the toxic chemical du jour, and they focus on what they can remove, but they forget the big bad actor. It's aluminium, big deal. Honestly, I mean, yes, it's a concern, but you're missing the really big problem.
Yes.
Yeah. I call it the chemical deal. Or they remove one chemical and they replace it with another that's even worse.
Yeah.
We did that with the bisphenol A and bisphenol F and bisphenol S, and they replace them with things that are even worse. Or for instance, zero VOC paint. They take out the VOCs, but they put in some chemicals that are even more hazardous than the VOCs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of the problem. I might mention essential oils. I need to really come clear with essential oils. Essential oils, all of the ones that we've analyzed all the essential oils available that we could find on the Australian market and in the US. All the ones called green, organic, natural, homeopathic, food grade, every single one of them had hazardous chemicals in them. And sometimes really bad hazardous chemicals like benzene, toluene, formaldehyde. So, the question is, how did these chemicals get into essential oils? I'm not going to hypothesize because I'm not in that industry, but believe to be able to make essential oils, it makes it more cost effective to remove them from the source using petrochemicals. Now, when my PhD students, she's now my postdoc, Ned and Neil Tawahi, let's see if we can make our own essential oil. So we went to the farmer's market, got big crates full of organic oranges, and she made essential oils by hand. It took a long time and a lot of oranges and a lot of labor to come up with just a little bit of essential oil. You can see why it's economically beneficial to just extract it using petrochemicals. And by the way, we use these naturally extracted essential oils that we did by hand, compare them to the commercial ones with our mosquito toxicity test. The commercial ones killed the larvae, the natural ones didn't. Okay, the mosquitoes no, and the mosquitoes were attracted to the natural one, not the commercial one. So there's that. To me, I believe that's the first study that really looked at the differential biological effects of natural versus synthetic chemical. Anyway, essential oils. I am astounded how they are used in a healthcare setting. How they are used in hospitals, used in HVAC systems. First of all, sensitive individuals like people with asthma or prone to migraines will react to this, how they can do it, and then also to be exposing all the occupants to these chemicals. So that's something I think is really...
It's not like you're going to a public space and you have a choice about
exactly
air quality. The air is regulated by the owner of the facility.
Exactly.
And they've taken upon themselves to add this. So air fresheners, fragrances, perfumes are adding something to what's already there. So if the inherent air was unsafe for whatever reason, it had plutonium in it, it had SARS or COVID virus or whatever in it, adding a freshener or a perfume or a scent isn't mitigating the risk that may or may not be there.
No.
It's just another thing for your body to deal with.
Exactly. It's and it contains hazardous chemicals such as formaldehyde. Essentially, all fragrance products I've tested generate formaldehyde. But the thing is, it doesn't solve the problem.
No.
It doesn't. It doesn't flush in the air. It doesn't disinfect the air.
I also liked Once Upon a Time. Sorry to interrupt, Brian, but we had a conversation also. Because for me, one of the light bulb moments when we've been talking over the years, Professor Anne, has been this understanding of also, you mentioned before about some people say a little bit's not going to be much of an impact, and maybe in Australia we've been lucky because we haven't been exposed to as many chemicals for as long as maybe somewhere like America might have. But I like that analogy you provided when we spoke some years ago around this idea that your immune system is like a barrel. It has the capacity to deal with so many different chemicals and infractions over time, and that eventually that barrel gets full, and that once that barrel is full, then ultimately a lot more of the symptoms that play out for a lot of people start to occur. So how do us Australians compare as far as what percentage of our population has their barrel full versus what might be the case in, say, somewhere like America?
Well, interesting. I'll start with this with saying I'm very happily an Australian citizen. So
Yeah, right.
So I do this. I think I've always been Australian. So I'm very happy to show I say this also a Queenslander. I say this with great pride and admiration for Australians. I just finished national prevalence studies this past year in Australia and in America and in a couple other countries. And actually, Australia is ahead of America in terms of how many people are reporting sensitivity to chemicals and fragrances. So unfortunately, it's with fragrances, it's over a third of the population, and with chemicals in general, about a fourth of the population is chemically sensitive.
Yeah, right.
Well, the problem is this is a one-way street. Once you become sensitized, you don't become unsensitized.
Yeah.
I mean, you can lessen the symptoms, but your immune system, you can be exposed to something such as have a mold outbreak, be exposed to mold, and then become sensitive to a whole range of things that you weren't before sensitive to. I mean, you get exposed to mold, then suddenly you're allergic to petrochemicals and gas fumes and fragrance fumes and cleaning supplies and pollens and everything. So that's why my concern is that the prevalence is just going to keep increasing because it's not something you can really reverse.
And so then we're left with a management and mitigating the issue. We don't actually ever cure or resolve the issue, is what you're saying.
Right.
So once you're sensitive, you're always going to be sensitive.
That's right. And they call people who are chemically sensitive the human canaries. And having an environment or a workplace that's suitable for canaries benefits everyone because canaries are your early warning. The canaries will know, people who are sensitive, what the problematic sources and chemicals are. And that can benefit everybody and prevent new generations of becoming sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know Christine will probably watch this later on, but normally the third person in our trio, Christine, is actually, which is interesting that you mentioned about mold. And Christine has some chronic issues, which most of the clinicians are tracing back to mold exposure because of the fact she lives on the Atherton Tablelands, which, is a beautiful place to live, but is in that wet tropics belt where it gets a lot more of that constant humidity, which then breeds, obviously, mold. And once it's in the structure, realistically, there's not much you can do about it, which might actually be a reasonable segue to two other questions I have, which is, one, we work together on the, and I probably got this wrong, tiny healthy house?
The tropical tiny, what was it? The tiny tropical healthy house, or the.
That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
Tiny tropical healthy house.
So there was two parts to that. One was the actual trying to build a small enough house that didn't have so many variables that we could try and control enough of the variables that we could try and deliver on a tiny house. And then obviously the dry tropics environment. So the two questions I have is it actually possible to build a healthy house? And secondly, are there climates around Australia which might be more advantageous if you were in a situation where it was going to be super important for you?
Great. Thank you for the question. I might start with this thing, like I'll say this to your viewers, that Darren, you and Rowan, you guys were amazing. The way you created this house. Let's say that I got a grant to be able to develop the model healthy tiny house. And you two guys, you got it. I mean, you figured it out right away. all the time that you spent on researching materials, doing things without the problems with off-gassing, toxicity, and you did it. You made the model healthy house, and it's right now for people who want to see. Isn't it at the Sustainability Center in Rose Bay in Townsville, Townsville City Council property? It's even acclaimed as Australia's most sustainable house by realestate.com. And I can tell you, I've been in and out of at least 100 healthy homes that claim to be eco, green, all that. That means nothing. It doesn't mean they're healthy. Just because a tiny house says it's eco or green or any of that, that has nothing to do with healthiness. Anyway, you guys know how to do healthy housing, and I was super impressed. So if anyone wants to have a healthy house made, these are the guys. Now, back to your questions. I apologize. I'm sorry. Could you repeat your two questions for me, please?
Yeah, so the second, I appreciate that, and thank you very much for that. And I think Rowan and I would say unequivocally that not only was it enjoyable and a great experience to build that house, but it was also an enormous learning curve for ourselves. That knowledge has been incredibly valuable from yourself, and we hope that we can pass that on to others to be able to fulfill them. But the second part of the question was, is there climates around Australia which are potentially better or not better, but potentially give you a better chance of having less issues in regards to trying to create a healthy house?
Yeah, well, the thought is that the ideal climate is warm and dry.
Okay.
Warm so you can use natural ventilation. You don't have to have an aircon system, and dry so you don't have the problems with mold and condensation. All that said, you can make a healthy house or renovate an existing house and make it healthy in any environment.
Yep.
So
yes,
and that's what I want to. So when I'm talking with your viewers here, is that not only you guys are expert at creating a healthy house, but on how to cure and renovate and remedy an existing unhealthy house. How do you make something that may not be optimal into optimal? How can you do it? So there's lots of things that can be done.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I think initially I started out toying with the perfect product or the perfect thing, and that was my training, my background as a material and manufacturer representative. But it turns out that almost anything can be optimized for better outcomes than what it is today. So to say that there's a perfect thing or a perfect house or a healthy house single answer, I think it's more fair to say that you can optimize any set of circumstances to the best outcome.
Right.
Would that be fair to say?
Well said. Absolutely. That there is no such thing as the perfect house. I mean, the thing is too is that I might briefly mention what I see as the big problematic pollutant now, and that's electromagnetic radiation from cell phone towers, mobile phone radiation, 5G towers. That you can have a perfectly safe, healthy house and create it on a beautiful big piece of property. They put a tower up and it destroys it. So this is something I'm really concerned about. Is unlike chemical sources, which you can kind of manage and mitigate with wireless and electromagnetic radiation, it's really a pervasive problem, and that's the thing I think we're going to have to be dealing with more and more.
And that's interesting because obviously this is something that's a little bit controversial depending on who you speak to. Obviously, telecommunication companies probably have a little bit more of a passive view on it, but I know that this has been quite it's become a lot more preeminent, the conversation in the United States, and it's not so much happening here. What have they been able to prove or validate from their experience in the United States, which has sort of said, hey, we do need to start to control some of this that maybe we're not listening to here?
Well, I think also thank you for your great question. Also, there's quite a bit of research done in Europe that's quite good. What I might do is basically saying it's a problem. The evidence is there are hundreds and hundreds of studies to demonstrate the problem. The ones who say there's no problem typically have an industry financing link. There's an organization in Australia called ORSA, ORSAA. You can Google them, pull them up. They have a wealth of information there. In the U.S., it's Environmental Health Trust, which Denver gave us. They have a lot of, so Google and EHG, Environmental Health Trust. You can find a lot of studies there. To me, I'm a scientist. So I go, why is it so-called controversial? Well, the reason it's controversial is that, the big money doesn't like it. So they tag it with controversial. The same thing with chemical sensitivity. They said it was a controversial. But how is chemical poisoning controversial?
Good point.
There's not a clear cause and effect. I said, no, you get exposed to poison, you have adverse health effects. There's an interesting thing. This is another side. In California, they're now working with the people of the California Air Resources Board and California Department of Public Health. They're now starting to regulate these consumer products, such as air fresheners and laundry detergents, because it turns out these products used inside are now the biggest source of smog in urban areas. So the indoor sources of fragrances are getting regulated because of their contribution to outdoor smog. So in cities such as New York City and Los Angeles, fragrance is now your dominant source of pollution.
Wow.
Yeah.
For the whole city.
There's been studies done in Los Angeles and in New York City. And so they're showing that basically, and these are products used inside. But you can think about it, if used inside, eventually the air is going to get outside. So they're not regulating indoor environments, but they're regulating products used inside because of their contribution to pollution outside.
Ouch.
I think you also passed on a very good point there, which I think is worth pondering, which is, obviously when there's quite a lot of money involved and there's consumer marketing and all of those things in play, that obviously what can happen is, a lot of these things are sort of ignored for quite an extended period of time until accidentally, we get to a point where, it's a straw that broke the camel's back sort of situation where the overwhelming evidence becomes so large that then we have to retreat from it. I have been very concerned that these things now seem to be taking longer and longer and longer to draw out. And we would have thought, with our understanding of the impacts of asbestos in our homes, with the understanding now of lead in our homes, and if you have a look at medieval times, even arsenic in wallpapers and all sorts of stuff, that we'd be more attuned to this, but we continue to trip over these continual issues only way too late. And I noticed at the moment, one question I have actually had was in Australia, there's a lot of talk now around trying to ban gas cooktops inside of homes. And this is only, the end of the line of all of those products. What do you think, what triggers, say, with gas cooktops, what triggers people to become concerned about them now that we haven't been concerned about them for the last 20 years?
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm going to actually answer the first part of your question is, what about what I call the hidden hazards, the creeping disasters, such as, say, electromagnetic radiation, such as fragrance products? Why do we regulate things very readily, such as asbestos and lead and cigarette smoke? Simple. Cancer is easy to measure. Cancer, no cancer. Okay, clear health endpoint. A lot of these effects that we're seeing from these exposures are very subtle, but this is not devastating and disabling. Neurotoxicity, immune system dysfunction, breathing difficulties, cardiovascular problems. People who are exposed to these products have seizures, they can't think right, they get migraines and all that. And it's very easy just to dismiss them and think, oh, that's life. But realizing it's really going to give a cumulative effect. And yes, a lot of these exposures do end up in cancer, but cancer is not necessarily the only or most important health endpoint of concern. Why are we getting to that? I think it's the recognition that gas used inside combustion can cause health problems. Again, it's because we're exposed to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of chemicals every day, and we can have any number of effects, so it's very difficult to say cause and effect, except for people who are sensitive. They can say, they have an effect around something, they don't have an effect if that thing's gone.
Yeah, it's almost like the science will have to catch up there at some stage in regards to understanding those little nuanced chemicals. And I get it. My wife has autoimmune disease, including fibromyalgia, and there's it's interesting that and I think there's maybe the good thing is, it's a positive thing to see, is that no longer are we just saying, oh well, we'll just leave it to the doctors because they know everything. Now there's big communities that are forming, and certainly even Jane has been experienced of, hey, why don't we check out this, and why don't we look into diet, and why don't we remove mold from the environment, because that might be part of those triggering factors, where I think she actually finds it a tad frustrating that the only thing that the doctors seem to go to is, well, if you can't use this drug, let's try that drug.
Exactly.
When, as you said, there might be a combination in the very environment we're living in, which is meaning that you can do whatever you want. You're not going to change those factors.
That's right. And so how do we know what the problems are? Like, say, listen to canaries. People
Yeah.
will tell you, but we're waiting for the science to catch up. I mean, it's very difficult with license to prove causes and effects, especially with subtle health endpoints. Listen to people who are sensitive, and you can see one thing's going to be problematic. Also, listen to your own body. If you don't feel well around something, don't say, well, I live in Australia, or it must be safe. Your body knows. Your body knows.
And we do that. It's funny that we do allow parents to have parents' intuition about their kids. Go back to the doctor if you've got a response, but it doesn't feel right. You go back and you question that. So it's odd that we don't give more heed to our own intuitive responses about, oh, it's funny how I only get sick in this home or this address or in this set of circumstances. Well, maybe if you only have migraines in one set of circumstances, look at those circumstances.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Exactly.
And I think you're right. I think maybe, and a little bit you talked about before, a little bit like we talked about with our check-in question as well. I think slowly but surely society is that whole embodiment, which is you're walking on the beach and enjoying being there, and the benefit to you also holistically, not just about your mental health. It's about how you feel grounded in the world and all the rest of it, and the benefit of salt on your feet and all of that other stuff that leads into the complexity of us as an organism. I think it's good that we're now starting to have those conversations. So maybe, just maybe, we're starting to move in the right directions, where we're not just saying, if we can't see a direct cause and effect, we don't want to know about it, because now we're seeing that, by the time it is getting to cause and effect, it's way too late. The horse is bolted.
That's right. And we can measure not necessarily what really matters. And I often get the question, well, isn't there some sort of air quality monitor I can use in my home? Well, unfortunately, the really important chemicals to measure, such as the aldehydes, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, other things, very difficult and expensive to measure. And so you can pay a lot of money on consultants to come and try to measure things, and it won't necessarily tell you anything. So if you get a lot of numbers, what does it mean? There's no regulatory guidelines anyway for indoor air quality. So even if you get numbers back, so what? A lot of these air quality monitors monitor CO2 or CO, which are considered, yes, pollutants, but they're not the things that we really affect our health. And so that's why I'm concerned about people spending a lot of money on people to come and do a lot of air, mold. Yeah, okay, there's a good test for mold. That's right. But I'm talking about volatile organic compounds, VOCs, which are the fragrance compounds. Very difficult, expensive to measure, and even if you do have readings, how do you make sense of it, and what are the guidelines? Basically say, it's like smoke. People say, is there a safe cigarette? Is there a safe fragrance product? I haven't yet found one, and I haven't yet to find a fragrance product that someone doesn't react adversely to. So it's learning things that eventually there's a problem with secondhand smoke. I say it's a problem with secondhand scents. You want to try to avoid the involuntary exposure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in your experience, Professor Anne, are the labels and words that speak to being green or organic products, is that made a shift?
I'm just analyzing. I've analyzed probably the green, organic, all natural, both building materials and consumer products, and I have found no difference chemically between the green, organic, or natural ones. Now, organic food means something, so that's different. I'm talking about your consumer products and your building materials. I have not seen a big difference chemically between the two.
So option A, option B, one's labelled organic, one's labelled green, or the regular, cleaning product off the shelf. There's not a tangible difference in the chemical makeup.
No. And actually, one of my PhD students did a study of indoor air quality at a major university, and the building that had the highest level of hazardous pollutants was the 6-star green building.
Wow.
Now, why was that? Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's I was going to say that I wonder, is that because of it's in such an enclosed environment?
It was both because it was airtight, very energy efficient, but the other reason is even though they use green timber products, the green timber products aren't necessarily free of emissions, and they coated them with finishes that emitted too. So there's no follow-up or monitoring. You can see you've got a green building, but following up on it, how are the formaldehyde levels post-construction?
Yeah. And I remember too, when we were building the house, you've got to be a little bit careful too. I mean, and you mentioned before about the organic and natural. I mean, not all natural compounds are good for humans, obviously, either. That's one thing people forget is that you go, okay, well, it's all natural. Well, if it's if it was put in it, like if there's a tannin or an oxidization occurring in a tree, which is designed to kill all of the insects in the area, it may not necessarily be good for us to have inside our food potentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we don't go shopping looking for green and organic unless we want to pay more for our goods, I guess, is the...
the main thing is, look, if you're looking at consumer products, first I should say I'm a cleaning enthusiast. My heritage is Northern European. It's the god of cleaning. We love clean things. I can clean anything perfectly well with just a few simple products. Vinegar and bicarb soda and a lot of, elbow grease, and sometimes a cut lemon, not lemon juice in a bottle. Cut a lemon and scrub, and you can clean and disinfect perfectly well. Vinegar is a great disinfectant. So you don't need to spend a lot of money on all these multicolored products with a lot of chemicals. You have no idea what you're putting in your body. I also have another adage: if you can't eat it or you can't drink it, don't clean with it, because eventually it's going to get in your body. Your exposure through ingestion and inhalation is the same as epidermal. So you're cleaning it. People think the skin is impervious. No, the chemicals get right in your body. Most of us in industrialized country carry several hundred industrial chemicals in our fat cells. That's where the toxic chemicals are stored. Children, when they're born, are born with toxic chemicals in their fat cells. And that's another thing that motivates me in this area is, why are children getting cancer? They're too young to have lifestyle. They're not smoking and drinking. It's not fair. They're being exposed to something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that.
Very early on.
We were having a conversation about the idea that, just about every child in America that is still born has DDT in their system at some level.
Exactly.
And isn't that catastrophic to think that, that's something that's in the environment that's being passed on before you even get a chance, as you said, to make bad decisions about your lifestyle. You're already starting off on a bad footing. So.
And even though there's kind of a debate, well, is it hereditary, is it inherited, or is it environmental? Basically, the research is showing that nearly everything is environmental, because the environment can cause genetic damage that's inherited. So now a lot of major studies have come out saying between 70 and 90% of all disease is from environmental exposures. It's not idiopathic or bad luck or disinherited. Yeah, there's a lot of luck involved, but there's things that we can control.
Yeah. Very good point.
It's a healthy, clean environment. Maybe some more outdoors time, less indoors time, less fragrance exposure.
Yeah. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that exposure. Another question I often get is, well, not exposing yourself to these products, isn't that like, don't you want to expose yourself to things to help build up your immune system? Okay. There's a difference between exposing yourself to natural ecosystems and biomes, like playing in the dirt, playing in the sand, developing your immune system that way, and being exposed to an inherently toxic chemical. And I'll give you an example. I have a good friend, and she smokes. And if she and I don't smoke. If we were to go into a bar, for instance, that had smokers in it, I would cough, but she wouldn't, because she's exposed to it. She's masked. Is that saying we should all smoke so we don't cough? When you're exposed to a toxic chemical, you become masked to it. You don't realize it's affecting you. And so that answers the question too of why these people who use fragrance products, they swear by them. Oh, I love it. It doesn't cause me any health problems at all. I feel so good wearing it. It's because it's addiction. It's toxicity. Toxicity and addiction are two sides of the same coin. So people become addicted to things that are toxic, and then your body masks the symptoms, so you don't realize you're being affected.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Interesting. And having done a few paint jobs over the time, spending a day with paint fumes, you eventually forget the paint fume, right?
Exactly.
So you've done 8 hours in this environment, and you can no longer smell the paint when you open the tin of paint. Exactly. You go to a store 6 months later and you open the tin of paint, it's overpowering, it's overwhelming.
Exactly.
So it doesn't take long to build up that resistance to the toxin you must be ingesting in your body.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Oh dear. All right. So if we've done this good work or bad work and got ourselves to a state that we're in a sensitive to our built environment, in your experience, is there a way to successfully remediate our environment, or is there a ointment or a pill that I can take to make it all go away?
Well, we can make our homes healthy, and that's absolutely possible. One thing is just change out your consumer products. That's easy. You can do that in a day, and stop exposing yourself to things that are problematic. Another is think about ventilation. Get a good air source coming in and out of your house. Doing that. Things such as that depends on what the source of the problems in the house. If you've got a lot of dust and mold in the carpet, switch out the carpet, put in tile. People often ask about manufactured wood products. I do not recommend that at all as part of a healthy house because it off-gases formaldehyde. Manufactured wood is not like your raw timber. Plain timber, real timber floors, great. Hardwood floors, great. But you have to be careful what you coat them with. You can have them sanded without unvarnished because the varnish can have problems. Tile is the king. Tiles, assuming that you're careful with your grout. There's not a lot of funny additives in the grout. Tile is great. So there's things that you can do to make and renovate a sick house into a healthy house.
Yeah. And again, it's about degrees. It's not about perfection or an absolute answer.
Right.
And each of us are going to be maybe a bit sensitive, some more to EMF than mold or to chemical or to, some other contaminant. So, each of us will have our own triggers, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think I like that idea. And one of the things that I have taken along the way there from what we've discussed is also that, if you allow your house to off-gas, so if you are doing something in a newly renovated house, and maybe you've tried to pick the right products, there's still a chance in there. So if you can still give their house the ability, and we're lucky in the tropics, and dry tropics in particular, we can let it heat up a bit, and then we can allow good ventilation to occur. Hopefully we give it a chance to off-gas wherever possible, and hopefully not with the occupant in there, so that you're not being trapped there. And I was only having a conversation about one of the concerns with air conditioners is the fact that if you don't do that, the new car smell and the new house smell are bad. And if you're just using a recirculative air conditioner to throw that back into your face, you're really compounding a bad problem and making it horribly worse. So I think that's one of the tools that I picked up from our conversation over the years. Let it heat up, let it ventilate, and let it give a chance to off-gas as much as possible before you go and expose yourself to it.
Absolutely right. Another approach is paint. Ron and I were talking today about the problems with paint. How do you find a safe paint that doesn't make you sick? Because all the zero VOC paint they never cure up, and they still off-gas. They can be off-gassing chemicals that you may not smell, but they still cause health problems.
Yes.
Like, what are you sensitive to? So one approach is paint a piece of wood or whatever you're going to be painting and ride around with it in your car. Let it heat up. See how you feel around it. So you don't want to start doing something like painting the interior of your environment unless you're sure you're going to be okay around that paint. Like, for instance, if you absolutely have to have a carpet before it goes in, the carpet smells, let it off gas outside your environment before you bring it in, and make sure you can tolerate it before it comes into your environment.
Yeah, hard to undo it once you've laid the floor and got the furniture on it. And
that's right, exactly.
Yeah. Look, Professor Anne, I'm sure we could continue going, but I'm really conscious of being respectful for your time and the hour of a weekday evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'd like to give people my website address too, where all my studies are. It's www.drsteinemann.com. And Dr. Steinemann is Dr. then Steinemann. I think I'm the only Anne Steinemann in the world. So if you Google Anne Steinemann, it will come up.
Awesome. Awesome. And we can certainly pass on. You're saying there's a bunch of research available on your website for free, and that an enormous body of work should be used and referenced for anyone who has questions in this space. We're happy to help from a practical and delivery point of view. If there's anyone who has immediate housing questions, I'm sure under the banner of Innovation House, we'd love to offer our input. Anne Steinemann, I'd love to have a conversation at a future point in time once we've successfully delivered some exemplar best practice healthy homes where people are starting to thrive and are getting past their triggered and sensitive conditions that unfortunately for some people living as canaries is not easy to find in a suitable housing. If they're to that stage of sensitivity, it really is a challenge just to find anything that they can be safely accommodated in.
Right, absolutely. You guys are the ones to do it, and I'll tell you, you are the one and only group of people and experts in this area that I recommend, because you know what's what and you know how to do it right.
Well, we have been well guided. Thank you very much. We will take your advice quite seriously, because naturally you've done a mountain of work in this space, and it's pretty hard. You're pretty compelling and hard to argue with.
I also would like to reiterate that, and also to your passion in a space that obviously is quite challenging, and you come up against a lot of roadblocks. I certainly, from working in the sustainability space, appreciate people who are going the hard roads to communicate something that's super important. And I think everyone should be grateful for what you're providing us all. So, and it's always great to catch up. So I again would love to catch up and have some more chats about this for sure.
Love to come back anytime. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Professor Anne, thank you very much for your time with People Purpose Place on a Monday evening. We will hold you to a future conversation.
Great.
Keep well and keep doing the great work that you do. Thank you very much, of course, to the support crew you have behind you, your researchers and facilities that you still access, and the testing that you do in the various universities. The work you're doing and your team are doing is invaluable for the health of all of us, whether we know it or not.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's about all from me tonight. How do you feel about a bit of a checkout to see how you feel and moving on?
Yeah. Are we still live now?
Yeah, we're still recording, but we're about to sign off. So we'll
maybe we'll call it a night and we'll plan for another conversation.
Brilliant, Anne. Good. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor Anne.
Speak again soon.
Signing out. Colby, you take it away.